Hello, everyone, and welcome to the next edition of the sales webinar series that we do here at Ball State Center for Professional Selling. Today, we have an international speaker, an international executive, who is Youvraj Seeam, who is an airline, e-commerce, and digital marketing expert. Even though he calls himself a specialist, I call him an expert. And Youvraj, thank you so much for taking time to talk to our audience on the topic which is on the top of everybody's head, big data. And what does big data mean? And how does at least the airline industry look at big data and how it helps drive sales? So thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me and our audience.
Yeah, hello, Deva. It is a great pleasure for me to be in this webinar series. And my name is Youvraj. I am based in a very beautiful and small island in the Indian Ocean called Mauritius. Mark Twain used to say that Mauritius was built first, or it was created first, then paradise was copied accordingly.
So how appropriate then that we actually have a person in the airline industry which might maybe be driving a lot of commerce to the country and the paradise of Mauritius. Huh? So indeed. So Yuvraj, so one of the things that you have is that you are in the domain of e-commerce, you're in the domain of digital marketing. And one of the things that we hear a lot right now is e-commerce, digital marketing, it is all about data. And you hear people talk about the concept of big data. So in your industry, could you tell me what big data is all about? I hear about the different V's of big data. So could you clarify what it means to you in your business?
Yeah, sure, Deva. In fact, big data is, we can say it is a buzzword and on which many concepts have been derived. And eventually we have artificial intelligence today to get insight from that big data. So big data, it is normally this commonly term, big data is associated with volume. That is the scale and quantity of data. In the travel industry, we have so many data which are generated right from the search and dream stage of the traveler's journey up to the booking, traveling, and then post-travel. Then we have the velocity, that is the complexity in data structure, that is in build, and the variety, that is a different format of unstructured and structured data. Here I mean that the variety means it comes from different sources. It can be form of rich media, it can be in form of text, it can be in form of images, it can be in form of videos, and social media has fueled it a lot. In addition to these three V's, that is a volume, velocity, and variety, you have other characteristics that we attach to it. That is the value that you extract, that is knowledge of the data, that the insight. Then you have the veracity, that is how accurate this data that you're actually dealing with is. Then you have it can have different meanings, which is variability, means it can have different meaning. For if it is a flown revenue for the CEO, it will be a different meaning, and actually for the sales manager, that would be a different meaning. Then you have, at the very end, you have the visualization. This is a very important part, because this is how you present the data to your C-suite, to your CEO, to the VP's level, for them to digest it, for them to derive the actionable insight. But when it is visual, it is easily interpreted, and you don't have to convince them on this.
So it's fantastic. So essentially you have the 6 V's of data and everything else. But the key to all this is having data, right? And tell me a little bit, because one of the things that I heard you talk a lot about, these enablers of big data. I've heard you talk a lot about that in our private conversations and some of your LinkedIn posts as well. So tell us a little bit more about this concept of what enables this big data. How can an organization tap into this rich data that you talk about?
Yeah, I think the enablers of big data, Deva, is first of all, we have an acceleration of the digitization of society in which we are living. And with the COVID-19, which is actually hitting the whole world, we have seen people tapping on this digitalization or digitization rather to entertain themselves, to communicate that to communicate with friends and people working from home. And then what we see also, people informing themselves about the status of different countries, their own state, their own country, their own town, where do we, means to go and find health information and precautions to be taken. People move to online purchases, not
Yeah.
going out to save. Then the other driver is the decrease of technology
No.
cost that we have seen over the
Exactly. Yeah.
years.
Mm.
Then we have connectivity
Yeah.
through cloud computing.
Yeah.
Cloud computing has revolutionized this connectivity, the data storage, which has become easy and less costly, and it is readily available for anyone in form of Amazon cloud or Google Cloud or Microsoft Azure
Yeah.
cloud. Then you have an increased knowledge about data science itself. You have social media applications which have revolutionized the consumer's behavior, where the consumers are now in control, and
Yeah.
so much data which is generated through LinkedIn, through Zoom, through Facebook, through Instagram, through WeChat, Weibo, and other social media applications. Then you have the upcoming
Yeah.
and maturity of Internet of Things,
Yeah.
where IT is being embedded in 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 the home supplies or in cars or in so many things that we are using, that is a machine itself. So these are the main enablers of big data, according to me.
Yeah. It's fantastic. It's great because all the things that you mentioned are things that we talk about in class, but it's wonderful to actually hear it in a structured manner from a professional who does it on a daily basis. So, one of the things we hear a lot about, Yuvraj, is the fact that yes, we have access to data, but the data is just data. You need people to be able to make sense of it, right? You talked about visualization, you talked about variability, you have so variety of data, and making sense of all this is as much a challenge of how do I use data, correct? So tell me some of the challenges that organizations such as yours face when dealing with big data.
I think the first big challenge that organization worldwide face is the internal establishing a data-driven culture. That
Yeah.
is the organizational readiness
Yeah.
for a data strategy. What I means is data driven in this context means that all decisions and processes within a business needs to be based on the data. So you need to have top management buy-in, a strong leadership which supports or champion these type of idea. Then you have technology, which is another challenge for many companies. Maybe they are not in a financial state to invest in it. And the other challenge that comes with technology is that there are so many infrastructure and variety of technology, which means that some organizations are at lost in choosing which technology could be best for them, then they might not have the skill set to drive this technology or to drive and enable that organizational readiness or data-driven culture. So skill sets shortage is another challenge that organizations uh, face. Then you have the very omnipresent data governance and data compliance issue, right? I have read recently that you have the California data protection or data privacy law that is actually it is in the limelight. Then you have the GDPR, and then each country, like my country, we do have the Data Protection Act. So the data governance and compliance, which is not easy to implement, it all depends on the right culture that you have to. By data-driven culture, what I mean is the main aim is to replace management or managers' gut feelings with data-derived fact and to empower all employees to actively use data to enhance their daily work. The ultimate goal is to fully utilize a company's potential by making decisions more successful, initiatives more effective, and competitive advantages more striking. So the key focus of organization by being data driven should be to enhance data interpretation through skills and bring the critical thinking in the decision making.
Fantastic. I've never had somebody explain this to me so clearly, and I think it's great that you have such vision and ideas clearly laid out. So now, as you said, there are so many. You said something which struck me as very interesting. You said the CEO might want to hear about something, the sales manager might want to hear about something else. So maybe somebody in services might be wanting to hear somebody else. Somebody in supply chain might want to have a different kind of knowledge, and big data can provide insights specifically for each of these domains, right? So from your experience in your industry, how do you use big data, and what are the applications for business for a company like yours of big data?
Yeah, in the travel industry and for airline, we use a lot of data, and data is mainly used to make strategic decisions.
Yeah.
So, for example, in normal circumstances, whenever we have a flight which departs, the next steps that goes on,
Yeah.
all the data from the flight which has taken off is captured, and then in terms of sales and revenue, in terms of passenger load, we build a dashboard for the C-suite and the CEO level, and this is available within the 24 hours that follow, so that the CEO can have and the C-suite can have a view of what at a high level in terms of passengers we have been carrying, what has been the load factor of each flight and each route, and then how much revenue this has generated for the airline. So these type of data or near time real or almost real, this is one. So once you have this type of data, so the C-suite or the CEO can ask now questions like, so why the load factor on London flight has been less compared to last year or compared to last month? So can you explain me this, or can you come with a solution to this? I can see that we had low load factor in business class compared to economy class. So could we come through a strategy or initiative to sell more last minute sales at the airport? Or could we implement a solution like Plus Grade, which offers a possibility of bidding for upgrade for anyone buying economy class? Or could we have encouraged people to redeem their miles and go for an upgrade from a paid economy ticket? So these type of questions inside is going to come while the data is going to uncover its insight. So the next best action will follow, and the initiatives to get more revenue, to be smarter as a business will follow.
Oh, so one of the things, I'm sorry, I was muted for a second. So one of the things that you mentioned was that we're talking about revenue, we are talking about the business side case of it as well, right? But you also mentioned something in an earlier conversation where you talked about how it can also help you in increasing your efficiency of operations too, right? Because you have data that goes into parameters of flight parameters and saying what can we do better, how can we better organize for on the ground services, in that front. So you also look at it not just from the viewpoint of revenue generation, but also increasing efficiencies in terms of all your ground level services that you offer, correct?
Right,
Yeah.
you're right. So what we did, a few years ago, Deva, is we set up a flight safety and flight optimization unit, where we offered two of our IT analyst guy to be promoted to that position. Now we have two people full time. What they do is, in airline, we are using a fleet of Airbus, and I'm going to talk about the industry now, not only Air Mauritius. So we are actually, so what we have, airlines have a cell or a unit of flight analyst or flight data analyst. What they do, their main job is to capture all the data that comes from the IoT, that is the Internet of Things, from the sensors, from the sensors, and that the airline or the aircraft itself generates while it is flying, while it is taking off, and while it is landing. So they capture all these data through the very set infrastructure which exists. And if you have a fleet of Airbus, or if you have a fleet of Boeing, both manufacturers do provide such type of infrastructure and technology to capture these data. And these data are transmitted directly from the aircraft to the ground, to a server which captures it and through the cloud, and then the airline can have it fed to a system. Now this system is going to analyze it for you, and through that initiative, you can optimize the use of fuel that you're going to use for a particular type of aircraft. You can analyze, and you can also see the security aspect of this flight. Then you can also optimize on the efficiency, overall efficiency in terms of maintenance, whether the engine has been functioning as per the set parameters. So all these data, you rightly touch these points. These are machine generated data, not transactional data that we mentioned previously. So now big data in form of machine generated through sensors, through the aircraft communicating through satellite system to a server, and this server capturing and analyzing through analysis or analytic engines, gives you the power to better modulate and to bring some form of predictability in
Yeah.
maintenance of aircraft and
Mhm.
to optimize your flight and to also bring your cost of operations
Well,
uh, to contain your cost of operation in terms of fuel use, maintenance, and so on.
but I love this because essentially what you're talking about is big data is much more than the transactional, which is the customer facing, if you could call customer facing kind of aspects. But then you also have the machine generated, which is not necessarily the customer facing aspect. But each one of them is important for you to look at the profitability of an airline, because with the transactional, you help your sales and marketing to increase revenue spend. I mean, revenue that you generate, and using machine generated and other means, you try to keep your operational costs. And anybody who's in business knows that if your revenues go up and your costs are under control, your profitability is likely to go up. So essentially what you're looking at is you're approaching data from so many different angles, with the main idea of driving the profitability and the sustainability. I mean, I'm talking about sustainability, the economic sustainability. Of course, when you say you also take into account aircraft parameters and do we optimally use the right amount of fuel, then you're also talking about environmental sustainability, of course. The idea is that you're driving towards that. And that's what I really like about when you actually break it down that way, because it's so big and vast, but if you can actually bite it into parcels, you can actually start seeing how big data or data by itself, if done and analyzed well, can give a lot of benefits to an organization. But one of the things that you mentioned, which I really, really want to touch upon, is this idea of governance. Because I've been in situations, I've talked to leaders who talked about data, and you just have data and you do not know what to use it for, or you could abuse the data. So you can actually, you know what I mean? Almost like warriors try to stalk your customers rather than give them a great feeling of being taken care of. So, what does governance mean in this era where data is so plentifully available? You can store data. What about things like privacy and that kind of stuff? So what does governance mean in this setting?
Yeah. In fact, data governance is very important for in this industry or in any industry.
Exactly, that's true.
In travel industry, it has all its importance because we carry passengers from different countries from one place to another location, and in many situations these are international passengers, so you need to respect the law of the country in which you are actually transacting.
Yeah.
And there is transfer of data which is involved from one, that is cross-border transfer of data. That is, in our case, it would be Europe to Mauritius, but in for an airline operating from Americas to Europe, it would be
Yeah.
Europe to America and America to Europe, or it could be beyond that. So data governance basically is a framework. So it is a framework which is required or which is set by organization. It is it is needed as a steering mechanism for data strategy itself. A proper data strategy orchestrates how business strategy is translated into data and analytics. So a data governance, it ensures broader thinking in terms of knowledge, organization, technology. So the data governance will, what it is going to do, it is going to ensure that the data strategy itself is implemented as it should be, including policies, frameworks to manage, monitor, and protect the data capital while taking people, processes, and technologies into account. And establishing a data governance is a long-term endeavor. Most of all, it requires a clear, conscious management decision on how to work with and use data. And this involves educating the whole organization from the C-suite level
Yeah.
to the management level, operational level, and front-end people about the importance of data privacy, about the importance of using data as it should be, and while respecting, as you rightly mentioned in your question, the data privacy and regulations in markets where the business needs to operate or the business is operating, that is EU GDPR or the California data protection law that we mentioned earlier, or it could be the local data protection act, which is prevailing in the country where we are operating.
Fantastic. Well, Yuvraj, there's so many things that you've shared with us that's very, very insightful about our understanding of big data. And I wanted to thank you so much for your time. I know it's the evening out there in Mauritius, beautiful Mauritius. And as we speak, our hearts go out to all the things that is happening because of the oil spillage in your beautiful, beautiful country, in your paradise. And fingers crossed that it does not affect the delicate ecosystem that you have out there. So with that, I would like to thank you so much for your time, and for the audience, stay tuned. Yuvraj is going to come back to us with other insights on other domains, but stay tuned for that as well. Thank you again for tuning in, and thank you once again, Yuvraj.
Thank you, Deva. It was my pleasure to be with you in this conversation.